an emotion. Art is about something that the artist wants to convey, even though the artist may not know what it is. Art, like creativity, is everywhere. The earth itself is a work of art. As soon as I'm able to do a screen share, Jane is going to do today's chalice lighting and reading.
Hello, everyone. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, every artist was once an amateur. Salvador Dali, have no fear of perfection. You'll never reach it. Yo-Yo Ma said, passion is one great force that unleashes creativity. Because if you're passionate about something, then you're more willing to take risk. And Georgia O'Keeffe, I found I could say things with color and shapes that I couldn't say any other way, things I have no words for.
Trying to end this screen share. Here it is. Okay. Are there joys and concerns?
Yeah, Rob. I'm very sad to announce that Shannon Roy has been placed in hospice for failure to thrive. She's told her doctors she will no longer take any food. So it's just a matter of time for her. I have posted on the chat, if you'll scroll to the top of the chat, her sister's name and address. Her sister would certainly appreciate hearing from everyone. She's having a heck of a time with Shannon. Shannon won't hardly even talk to her, and yet she's her caretaker, her family caretaker. So I would appreciate that. On the other, on the COVID front, Jake Starr has COVID, so we're waiting to see whether or not it runs through the family. Hopefully it won't. And I think that's all I have this week.
Thank you, David. That's indeed sad news about Shannon and her sister burdened with that. Are there other joys or concerns?
Yes, I have one joy, and that's that my daughter also came down with COVID, one of the crossover cases. And I think my other granddaughter did too, but her test was negative, although she had the same symptoms. Anyway, Emily is doing well and should be able to return to work tomorrow, but she certainly didn't feel good. And I would just say, you don't even want the crossover. You get pretty sick. So we hope for recoveries of all people who have COVID, and stay healthy out there.
Thank you for that, Nancy. Sounds like a nasty thing to have, and we all need to have our precautions. Take care of ourselves.
I have something, Rob.
All right.
This is Jenny, something on the joy side. Many of you know my sister Chris and her children, Sydney and Sam. Sam and his fiance are here now visiting after needing to cancel their Christmas plans due to them having COVID. So they are all recovered and they are here visiting. We are so happy about that.
I can imagine how happy you are, Janine. That's a wonderful thing. It reaches all of us. Are there others? How about any announcements or and or birthdays, anniversaries? Hearing none, Kathy is going to do a reading as soon as I can get a screen share for her.
While you're doing that, Rob, I'd just like to do a shout out for my dad. Next week, he'll turn 99. And we did finally get him in not a rest home, but assisted living, and he's doing great, and he's eating well, and he's wandering the halls and talking to people. So just feel really good about that.
Yeah, that's certainly encouraging, Nancy. Thank you. Kathy?
Thank you. I'm going to read an online article that I found. It was written by Daniel Lee Jacobs in February of 2019, and its title is there a difference between good art and bad art, or is it all subjective? He writes, I get asked this question a lot. Hundreds of years ago, the answer to this question would have been a lot less subjective. Nowadays, it's a much more open-ended question. If we look back at the art produced across the 14th to the 18th century, from the Renaissance to the Romantics, art was highly representational. The aim was to create art that was highly realistic, even if the scenes were rather grand. The quality of the artwork was highly correlated to the skill of the artist. We could say artwork was good or bad, depending on whether the painting accurately represented the spray of the ocean, the reflection of trees in the water, the emotion of the figures and characters. It wasn't until the time of Claude Monet and the Impressionists that this notion began to change. The Impressionists focused on light and movement, creating images which captured the transient feeling of the scenes in front of them. At the time, they were mocked and scorned for their impressions of the world, which to the people of the day appeared like bad painting. Of course, nowadays, this isn't the case, and people pay millions of dollars for Monet's water lilies. Today's contemporary art takes an even bigger leap away from reality. Abstract art can't be judged on its relation to real life, while for conceptual art, the idea itself is the most important aspect. In today's world, there are so many forms of art, which aren't just 2D, they're 3D, audio, interactive, or immersive. Art cannot be judged based just on its visual qualities. Even if critics do talk about color or composition or tone, what makes good and even great art stand out is the clarity with which the artwork's central idea or concept shines through and is embodied in the artwork. This is a function of the execution as well as of the idea itself. A beautiful photorealistic landscape can be brilliant because it can transport you to that place so that you feel immersed in it, so that you imagine the breeze on your face as if you were there. A sculptural installation might be brilliant because it so aptly and poignantly characterizes a difficult or current topic. Take
Kathy, you've gotten muted somehow.
Can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Yes,
Okay. While there is always a personal undertone of what you will like and dislike, I do believe there is a difference between good art and bad art. Just like good and bad writing. Good writing may be playful, it may be serious, it may be complex or concise. It may be factual or fictional, but it takes you on a journey. With bad writing and with bad art, you soon forget what the storyline is and never return to find out where you got lost. That's all.
thank you, Kathy. Yeah, I'm reminded of a quote. I'm reminded of a quote that I saw recently, that even though there is well, as Kathy mentioned, there is a difference between good art and bad art. I'm reminded of someone saying, bad art is still art. Lou, as soon as I can get the screen share for her, is going to give us another message. Lou.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. This thing keeps telling me I'm muted. I'm not. Okay, I'm curious whether this picture makes you think of a person, fictional or real. If so, you could type it in the chat. This is a photo of an oil painting done on an 18-inch by 24-inch canvas board. So it's a pretty typical size for a painting. I had the good fortune of being friends with two very talented art students during my undergraduate years. As I have no artistic talent myself, I was just amazed and awed by the things that they could do. And so I fell heir to several of their works. Of course, they were going to classes and churning out learning projects, really. But to me, they were just great art. I remember that I really at first did not understand pictorial art. I didn't understand what it was about. So I took a semester of oil painting, and surprise, surprise, it did not turn me into a great artist or even an acceptable one, but it did teach me a lot about the artistic impulse. And so I became a better consumer of art. I have, as I say, several works that these two young women produced, and several of them have been hung in our house for decades because I just like them so much. This one I never did hang because I couldn't seem to find the right place for it. It's quite eye-catching. The colors are pretty stark. And also, it's not meant to be a finished work. I think you can see up near the neck of the person what looks like a handprint. You know, it's messy. I don't think Waverly ever intended it to necessarily see the light of day, but I love the composition for one thing. You notice how on all four edges, a part of the picture is cut off. So this creates a kind of crossways effect that's stunning. And I don't know whether she was experimenting with that kind of composition or whether as an artist she just did that naturally. The painting was done in oil. You'll notice some thin lines, and you can tell with the original painting, and you can rub your hand over it and feel the grooves. She scraped the paint off to make those lines, and they are part of the design of it. And I wonder how on earth she did that. Paint doesn't stay soft forever. And I don't know if she did this entire thing in one day and then scraped the paint off. I don't have the answer to that. Okay, well, I noticed at least one person in the chat had the same opinion I do about this painting. I see it as a painting of Don Quixote. The rider to me appears to be dressed in armor, and that's just merely suggested. If the head doesn't look like a person's head, it looks like the visor on a suit of armor. And then there's that thing around the neck, the drawing around the neck that looks sort of like armor. So it's just armor is suggested. And of course, the fact that he's carrying a lance, people who carried lances were always dressed in armor. So that makes me think of Don Quixote. I Googled Don Quixote and I found a whole bunch of pictures that were of very upright rider with the lance in a perpendicular position, and he looked very proud. This guy looks, again, as somebody else said, he looks defeated. And he's got the lance lowered as if he was ready to charge, but the horse is munching on the grass. Both horse and rider appear very skinny. And just, it does appear, it does give an impression of sadness, of defeat. And that may be another reason I've never hung it before. It just fascinates me how with just a few strokes, a skilled artist can give these impressions. So a picture is worth 1,000 words, definitely. And I think after sitting with this picture, I'm going to try harder to find a place to hang it up because I do really like it. That's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
I definitely think you should hang it, Lou. I love it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. Yeah, that was really something. By the way, oil paint stays wet for a while, so it allows going back in and scratching out those lines you mentioned. And now Raymond's going to talk about his art, or about art that he finds interesting. Raymond?
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. For me, there is what you might call, what I have is a dialogue with a piece of art. The question is, what does that piece of art bring to me, reveal to me? The subject matter, color, form, story perhaps, and return, what is it that I bring to it, my interest in the subject, my knowledge of it, my knowledge of the era of the piece and the context of the time. I'm going to show you some pieces of art that have been very compelling to me. They're pieces that I just remember immediately when a certain artist is mentioned. They're not necessarily the most famous or even the best pieces of art that I've observed, but they've had a very dramatic and personal connection with me. The first is Head of a Horse by the artist Rosa Bonheur. It is simply an image reproduced in a newspaper or magazine that my grandfather gave to me. I cherish this piece because of its relationship to my grandfather, my love of horses, and the incredible detail that the artist achieved in producing this image. You can see the veins in the horse's head. The picture is only 4 by 6 inches. A little backstory: as a boy, I was entranced by images of horses. I had my own horse in my teenage years. I would go over to my grandfather's place and work cattle for him. But when I tried to recreate the features of a horse on pen and paper, the results were hardly recognizable. So perhaps that's why I so gravitated to what other people have been able to do. The second image, David, when you have before you a work of art like the head of a horse, one of the first things you want to know about it is who produced it. In this case, as I mentioned, the artist is Rosa Bonheur. I began to exploring her history and her other works, and this image is her famous The Horse Fair. It's an oil on canvas. It was started in 1852. She first exhibited in Paris in 53. She visited, dressed in men's clothes. She visited twice every week for about a year the Parisian horse market. This piece captures the spirit of that horse market with its noises, smells, and sense of danger that made it into high art. This piece is 8 feet by 16 feet, and it's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Now, the interesting thing, Bonheur dates 1822 to 1899. She painted primarily animals in a realistic style. She did some sculpting. Her family was Jewish in origin, and they adhered to the Saint Simeon sect in France, a Christian socialist sect. She grew up in Bordeaux, moved to Paris. She is quoted as saying, "I'm a painter. I earn my living honestly. My private life is nobody's concern." She lived with Natalie Micus for 40 years. She was an infamous figure in her day, having been granted special permission by the government to wear trousers like George Sand, and was such a celebrity in 19th century Paris that there was even a widely distributed doll, Rosa doll, made in her likeness. She was the richest, most famous female artist in 19th century France. Next image. Eva and I have spent many hours in museums, both historical and art museums. And when we were in Rome a few years ago touring Italy, we had the opportunity to visit a special exhibit of the works of Michelangelo Merisi de Caravaggio. He's an Italian painter, lived from 1571 to 1610. And his paintings combine a realistic observation of the human condition, both physical and emotional, with dramatic use of lighting. His most famous work is this one, called The Conversion on the Way to Damascus, painted in 1601. This is the story from the book of Acts on the Saul going to Damascus. And while he was on the road to Damascus, this light appeared from heaven, flashed all around him. He fell to the ground and said, with the voice coming down, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And then as a result of this, he goes on in, becomes Paul, and converts, and no longer persecutes Christians, becomes a Christian, becomes the apostle. This is 6 feet by 8 feet, and it is in a church of Santa Maria de Popolo in Rome. It is amazing to see the way in which the artist Caravaggio was able to show that light coming in from the right down on Paul. And I found it to be one of the more compelling pieces of art that I've ever seen, despite my lack of identity with the subject matter. Next image. This is an image of from a Northern Cheyenne man who'd been incarcerated in the Ford County Jail in 1879. Many of you were probably on when Denise Lowe and I did a program on the story of these Northern Cheyenne prisoners, and we've produced a book on it. I show you this one because of all of those roughly 200 images that these 7 warriors produced. This to me is one of the more powerful ones. It's a warrior astride his horse seeking to kill a buffalo. Although primitive, it is evocative and to me quite powerful. It's in the Kansas State Historical Society. The original is only about 3 inches by 5 inches. It was a very small little notebook. In this case, I like this image so much that I had it blown up, and it is a very interesting piece to me. The final piece I've added mainly as a contrast to that one. This doesn't necessarily resonate to me the same way the others have, but I added here because it shows a contrast between the traditional ledger art that I just showed you and what a contemporary ledger artist does. And in this case, this artist found a page from a treasurer's warrant book in Butte County, South Dakota, and drew on it the image that you see. And he calls this piece, Our Grandfather's Ride with Us Today. And in a way, it's a return to the symbolic and more abstract kind of art in contrast to the others. These are some images that I find most interesting, and I offer them to you today. Thanks. And look, if you have any questions, we shall do that in dialogue. David, back to you, or Rob, back to you.
Thank you, Raymond. That was so very interesting. I especially enjoyed the last 2 art made on ledger paper. Presumably, that's all they had to work with. So interesting. Thank you. I'm going to give a talk now and do another screen share. Well, I jumped the gun a little bit, so bear with me. I have some other narrative to say first. Art and art appreciation. Some find art uplifting in a spiritual sense, while other viewers may find the same artwork annoying, difficult, repulsive, or just plain hard to understand. I get that. Some decry the differences between fine art and design, and often characterize fine art as high art and design as low art. Some might say that the art that I personally make is design and not fine art. Others believe that art is a broad subject and is often difficult to describe or define, and which encompasses many differing elements. and that design is only one. But my belief is that art is part of creation. Even though one may not believe in a creator as the Almighty, who we've been told created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, resting on the seventh. My take on the matter is that we live in the presence of creation. This creation takes more forms than any one person can comprehend. For example, take a walk through Gage Park's Rhenish Rose Garden to sample the multitude and variety of roses. While there, sit on a park bench and contemplate the thousands of different insects, spiders, trees, cats, dogs, frogs, as well as lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my. Just looking at the human species, we know of differing sizes, colors, and behaviors. And of course, gender differences. Human emotions vary as do his preferences. Some like it hot, some not. Go to the library and witness the thousands of titles and subjects written by thousands of writers and their numerous styles. Colors take a wide range, beginning with the three primaries, red, yellow, and blue. Mixing any of those together, along with black or white, one can create green, orange, purple, dark and light hues and values, dark green, light orange, pink, lemon, and turquoise. Human art varies accordingly and seems to have begun with simple mark makings, handprints, stick figures of animals on cave walls. Modern art today features work of simple mark making. Though not art, a visit to the Mark Twain Cave in Hannibal, Missouri reveals a count of nearly 250,000 signatures, or so I've been told. These are timestamps written in candle soot by numerous cave visitors over the ages. People like to leave their marks as if to say, I was here. And they make these marks in many different ways. Some are different and some perhaps mundane. Today's program is about visual arts, as you've seen, mostly painting, drawing, and some sculpture. It is also about human imagination and about what happens if I do this. There are more art styles, genres, and art makers than one can shake a stick at, to use that old cliche. A recent newbie to the art world is digital art. When digital photography came on the scene, many longtime film photographers were aghast. Putting digital photography down as somehow not real or not good enough. Excuse me. This seems to be simple human behavior that attempts to dismiss the new in favor of the old and the established. Now, digital photography is mainstream today, and film usage has faded and declined. Digital art has a similar story, but like digital photography, is becoming more accepted. In fact, digital photography is often combined with digital art to create something anew, something that is new and different and likely never been seen before by human eyes. But how does one evaluate art? Are there ways to understand or possibly judge or understand art? There are. There exist art and design principles and elements. Examples of art elements are line, color and value, shape, textures, space, and form. Examples of art principles are contrast, repetition. I noticed in Raymond's last slide, there was a repetition of, I believe, 5 different horse figures on the ledger paper. Emphasis, balance, movement, and unity. The art I make has a modern and contemporary touch, at least I hope it does. and is mostly digital, though I sometimes use real paint. I've used watercolor, ink, acrylic, wax crayons, and some collage to express myself. I find it is the self-expression that I seek, and I like to share my artistic attempts with other like-minded people, knowing full well that not everyone appreciates, not everyone appreciates my creations. C'est la vie. Now for some examples. And I hope you see the slide before you, line and shape examples. The example on the left shows two lines in contrast. The longer line curve line followed by a short straight line. The longer and curved line dominates the smaller. This shows domination or concept. The next example shows four squares inside a larger box, illustrating repetition and difference. The fourth square could be considered a focal point because it is separate and distinct from the row of three. Also, being tilted shows movement. The bottom squares also show separation, isolation, and variation. Line and shape are the building blocks of art. Next slide. One shape illustrates simplicity and minimalism. Some consider minimalism to be an art genre. Note that the circle is not placed in the center of the box. Being offset, the circle impact is increased. And by placing the circle in its location may add to the overall mystery. What is that circle doing up there and why? Why is it up so high? Mystery adds interest, and I usually consider interest to be a necessity. If art is uninteresting, what is the point? The circle is, of course, the focal point, the only focal point. Focal points are used in art to draw one's attention and thereby say, look at me. Trapped or confined. Another concept, shapes can be put together to illustrate a concept in a graphical manner. In this case, the circle, it seems, is denied movement by the rectangular shapes. Trapped or confined, part 2. Moving away from circles, squares, and rectangles, this image is one that I created digitally. I often share on social media, specifically Instagram and Facebook. I believe art is to be shared. The shape of a person under the spider shape may not be completely trapped, but is put into an unenviable position. The chaos of shapes above and below add to the dilemma and to the chaos, as do the array of microdots surrounding the person's figure. Holiday lines and shapes. This is something we're all familiar with, an example of commercial or graphic art. Note that the bright red Kleenex circle draws one's eye toward that logo, not accidentally. Also note the various but similar and familiar shapes. There are shapes within shapes, shapes on top of shapes. Many of the lines are curved, dotted, and colorful, showing movement, which also attracts the eye. The small gray background dots help give a sense of depth. The colors are mostly faded, taking a secondary place to the red circle logo. All designed to catch one's attention and to say, buy me. This is a before and after. It's a digital photograph on the left that I took at a beach, followed by another image superimposed upon the first, create a different take. This is an example of blending digital work with digital photographs. The two images are digitally blended together in a way that brings out this color. Digital distortions, freedom of expression, and just having fun. I find that digital expressions give me lots of elbow room to be free with mark making, color, shapes, lines, texture, and the distortion that I favor. Human face depictions, though distorted, are often recognizable as such. This image began as a digital drawing. My motivation was to make a unique to me expression and to have fun doing so. I also like that I'm able to put my art through evolutionary steps as I try to find and see what works and what doesn't. What I like about this piece is the comical feel that I experience, along with the colors and marks. Artist John Michael Bechway. He was an African-American artist of French heritage, who at our age 23 in 1983 gained worldwide fame. Bechway began as a street and graffiti artist in New York and was part of the neo-expressionist movement, characterized by intense subjectivity. What I appreciate about his work is the freedom he exhibits. Oh, to be free. Bechway used social commentary as a means of identifying with the Black community of his time. Perhaps he also wondered why things were so different for his race. This is Bechway's in Italian. I'm obviously not privy to what Bechway was trying to say here, but I do appreciate the use of bold colors, commentary, free-form imagery, and mark making. In a recent art class I took, we were told to find an artist we liked and then to steal a piece, using the premise that artists over the ages steal from one another. In this case, steal does not mean plagiarism. Instead, I take it to mean borrow the style, use the style. In the class, the steal was intended as a learning tool for us. Because I appreciated the freedom, I stole Bechway's piece, and my rendition is on the next slide. Fauvism is and was an art movement in the early 20th century, 1904 to 1910. Fauvism is a French word translating to the wild beasts. It had its critics. Its leaders were Henri Matisse and André Derain. Georges Braque also participated, then later teamed with Picasso, where the two of them began a new movement called Cubism. As I researched Bechway's style, there was mention that his art was similar to Fauvism. This piece is acrylic, wax, crayon, and oil pastel on paper, not digital. I call it happy. Yeah, mostly, but not completely weird. Yes, I admit that some of my art attempts may be considered weird. However, weird is sometimes a good thing in art, at least to get some attention. This piece is from a photo I took, and these are small stepping stones embedded in the sidewalk between two Noto buildings. They weren't that color when I took the photo. They caught my eye as I found the shapes in both their sameness as well as their differences to be of interest, perhaps not to others. We humans often see our world differently, and that's a good thing mostly, I believe. Using digital tools, I changed the colors and brought out some of the marks that were natural in the stones, which also adds texture and attracts the eye. This I did simply because I enjoyed doing so. And that concludes my presentation. I would like to remind you that next Sunday, Bobby and David will speak on the UU fourth principle, free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We'd all like to hear any feedback you might have, talk back, and questions. So what say you, if anything? Don't forget to unmute.
I'd like to thank everybody for a very interesting program. I am not an artist. I'm not an art critic. I'm, you know, the old saying, I know what I like. And I like a lot of the work that you do, Rob. Good job. Thanks for everybody for participating. I thought it was real interesting hearing everybody's perspective on art. Perhaps something we can revisit down the road. Thanks.
Yeah, I would like to say something, and too really appreciated what people shared this morning. It was fantastic. I myself have never been someone who could draw, although I was surrounded by people who could, including my own mother. So it's always a thrill to me if anyone in my family, such as my grandchildren, shows some talent in that direction. So this year at my grandson's school, they could submit a design, Christmas ball design. And if selected, it went to the National Christmas Tree in Washington, D.C. So my grandson had one of those winning designs. And I'm going to try to show it to you, and I don't know if you can see it at all. But it's a Kansas scene. And I particularly wanted Raymond to see the horse. The horse is the predominant figure, and it looks like he's 1 degree removed from a dinosaur. But he has a very long neck and a very long tail and very short legs.
Thanks. I love that. Love it.
Still a horse.
And it's still a horse.
A horse is a horse, of course, of course.
Yes.
Rob,
Yeah.
I don't know if everyone's fit. I have something completely, this is a concern that I just received 5 minutes ago from Susie Loy. If I could read this to everyone.
Please.
Update. This is from Susie. I had cataract surgery January 4, and all looked good to proceed on the other eye this Tuesday. However, Friday night, Lori Yockers was over for dinner when I suddenly developed severe pain, redness, and vision blur in the surgical eye. Lori was a big help reaching Dr. Vendegaard. When I got up Saturday morning with complete vision loss, I texted Dr. Vendegaard, and he met me at his office to find I had, I'm going to not be able to pronounce this, endophthalmitis, a very serious infection. He sent me to KC to see a retinal specialist who took a biopsy and injected antibiotic into the back of my eye. Not a pleasant experience. Dr. Vendegaard saw me again this morning and is concerned about pressure in the eye, so added meds that and will see me again tomorrow. Then back to Casey Doctor Tuesday. I could lose my vision in this eye, so your good thoughts are appreciated. I may need to take several days off this week, so if you need something and cannot reach me, contact Alan Foster, Joe Silsby, or Valerie Eakes Khan. So yeah, that just came across the desk, as they say. And I know we all will be holding Susie in our hearts.
We certainly are, Janine. Thank you so much for that. What a horrible development for Nancy, for Susie.
Linda, was there a comment you wanted to make?
Well, yes, thank you. First of all, that is so scary. I'm feeling so bad for Susie. I'm always amazed at the programs that our committee comes up with. I learned so much from the readings and all of your personal insights about the kind of art that speaks to you. It's so interesting. I've always said I'm not artistic, and I blame it on my 7th grade art teacher. I did all the extra credit and I still only got a C. So I thought that was, at the time, young Linda took that as a strong message that I could never be an artist or even be creative. And I know Janine says that everybody can sing, but I still don't think I can sing or be creative. So be careful what you tell young people. Anyway, it was an incredible program. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. I want you to know that you're my favorite art critic on Facebook.
Thank you.
I'd like to add something, I guess, thinking about my experiences in the past. Going through college, we had, of course, to take all kinds of courses. But I think my most absolutely favorite all-time forever and ever course was taking a pottery class, or several from a particular instructor at Fresno City College, who was just a wonderful instructor, encouraged all of us. And my love for pottery and pottery designs and making pottery and using glazes has been with me forever. Unfortunately, my hands don't want to cooperate anymore, so throwing pots is out of the question, but I still dabble in it. I think there was also an art appreciation class I took, who we were encouraged. We had to make a project and dabbling in different things. And I actually used, I knew somebody who had, what are those torch things, welding stuff, and created something with welding that was like, whoa, never done that before. And that was kind of fun. So through life, there's just lots of ways to play with things and enjoy them. When I made my last move here out to north of town, and packed up and weeded out things I wasn't going to keep anymore, I did not throw away my little basket of rocks. And now I sit on my porch and I make those little rock statues, where you put the big one and the little one and the littler one, create these kind of sculptures out of rock. And that is so much fun, and it doesn't take but a bunch of rocks. So enjoy art and have a good time, whatever you do, because it's just good stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. That was wonderful.
I have a comment. I'm sure a lot of you follow the Unitarian Universalist Hysterical Society on Facebook. It's a lot of fun, usually cartoons and conversations that can give you a good laugh. And just this week, I was reminded of this by something Linda said. There was a conversation between a mother and a 5-year-old child. And the child asked the mother, "What is it you do?" And the mother said, "Well, I teach art. I teach people how to draw at college." And the kid says, "You mean they forget?" And I think we have, like Linda said, you have to be so careful to not draw judgments about young people and what they say, because they believe they are artists and they need our encouragement. So that's all.
Yeah, one comment can just shut down a whole lifetime. It's so sad to think about, consider how adults affect children. Anyone else have a comment? And I'd like to thank everyone for their participation.
Any closing words, Rob?
Oh, I don't. Maybe except to say that even a simple line expression can be creative and artistic in its own way. And I would encourage people to just sit down with a piece of paper and pencil and express yourself. It doesn't have to be something you're going to sell for $1 million. It's just expression.
Thanks, Rob. See you all next week.
Thanks, David.